Welcome back to the Long Way Back podcast. I'm Timmy Long, joined today by Georgie Cooney. Georgie, how are you?
Hi, Tim. I'm good, thanks, Timmy.
This is our first podcast back here in maybe 2 or 3 months, I'd say, is it?
I think that's about right. Yeah. I think we needed a break.
Yeah. And we're in our new studio.
It's brilliant. Have you spent your summer doing this?
I spent my summer here doing this, and I'm very happy with it. It looks really, really well.
It's good.
And today it's a pleasure to have our first guest, Pamela Drynan, one of the directors with Subotica. You currently done a documentary based in dyslexia here in Ireland, and myself and Georgie joined on it, and we seen the viewing of it, the premiere, or was it the premiere or the?
I think it was the court premiere.
The court premiere, yeah.
Thanks for having
yesterday,
me.
and it looked really, really well. And we firsthand seen how much work went into it, and it really looked amazing and fair play. And it's out next Wednesday. And is it RT?
Yeah, it's on Wednesday the 18th on RTE1 at 9:35. So a really good slot. We're delighted with the slot. So,
yeah.
And it's called Lost for Words.
Exactly, and which dyslexic people do. Get lost for words, and I probably will during this interview on numerous occasions. But listen, Pamela, before we get to talking about the documentary and everything, do you want to give us a little bit of background based on yourself and where you come from and how you got into the directing and stuff?
Well, I think I've always had a real interest in people and perhaps people who've had experiences that have been in the margins or have been really challenged by traumatic events. And I did a documentary about a chap called Robert Drake. It was called Where I Am, and it was basically about an American guy who'd been beaten up by a couple of lads in Sligo, and he went back to Philadelphia and then returned to kind of meet his to meet the chaps, and
wow,
like restorative justice.
Yeah. He came on his own
and
mission.
Did he meet
back.
him in prison or?
No. He actually didn't meet them in the end, but his whole process of coming back to the scene of the crime, was really powerful. And and I think taking on subjects like I did a documentary called Unbreakable about survivors of sexual violence, and it was just really important for me to give voice to women who'd essentially been silenced. So yeah.
Oh, good for you, Pamela.
Both of those documentaries to me sound like you need to be somebody who's in a really understandable place to be able to work with these people and understand where they're going, what they're going through, and also meet them at their level and approach it in the right way. Because when somebody's been traumatized in any of these ways, they're going to be very what's the right word? Caught up in what other people think of them, fight or flight, based on what has happened to them. So we able to work with them at a different level and understand where they were coming from and approach everything at a nice, calm, comfortable level for people.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it's very important to build trust, in those particular relationships, and it takes a while to really, I guess, witness someone else's story and sit with that. And the process for me is quite long and very detailed, and trust builds up over time. I also work with wonderful crew members, wonderful team around me, and that really helps, I think, I think empathy is very important, but I think just being present and witnessing other people's stories is very important to me. And essentially, even in working on this documentary about dyslexia, I found just from my own experience of that, being able to handle the range of emotions, because there can be a lot of anger, a lot of upset. There's also great highs, great lows, but when you hear people's experiences, it's it can range. There's a roller coaster of emotion that goes on in understanding.
There are a few scenes in that are triggering. They're emotionally triggering. Some of they're very heartfelt, genuine responses to the situation that you're filming, which I think will engage an enormous amount of people when they see this documentary, because there's so many people who I think will go, that's exactly how I felt. That's exactly how I feel, which I think is so beneficial to anyone who would be watching this. I mean,
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Like when I was explaining some of my own stuff and some of the other people that were on, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people sitting inside in their front rooms and they're going to relate, and it might be the first time they're ever hearing this information and they're able to relate to this person, and it might help them in their own journey where they might have a belief that they're actually stupid or they're not able or education's not for them. They might turn around and start saying, do you know what? He was where I was, or she was where I was, and look at where they are now. All they needed really was a bit of insight into what was actually going on for them, and to know that there's nothing wrong with them. They're just dyslexic or dyspraxic or dysgraphia. Dysgraphia came up a lot actually during the documentary, and I didn't realise that dysgraphia was such a big thing with students and stuff, because my own daughter has it as well. And I never really heard of anybody else having it other than her until the documentary. And
but I think that is actually a really good point, in the fact that you're a parent, and it's not just the students who are going to be able to relate. There are parents who are going to relate to some of these parents who go, oh my God, I didn't realize that they felt that way. I had that experience, or, my child is in the same boat. I didn't know that dysgraphia was as common as it is.
There was one other point I thought was very valid as well, and I don't want to be giving away too much for people. But one of the parents said, oh my God, my child is dyslexic. What are we going to do? And for me, when she said that, it wasn't that she was a bad parent or anything. What it meant was, we have such a negative view of a child being dyslexic that their life is over. And I think that needs to be changed. We need to start changing the wording and the understanding of what it is to be dyslexic, because parents think it's the end of the world for their kids when they hear of it, and it's not. It's completely not. If anything, it's a great thing, because if a child is dyslexic or dyspraxic, they are, and that's the end of it. But the knowing of it, you'll be able to get educated around it. And I think that's key.
Absolutely. I think what's really, really important is that when it's about using opportunities to kind of excel in your strengths.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, strengthening the strengths and weakening the weaknesses, which a lot of people go, I don't quite understand that, but it does make sense that you can go forward and go, do you know what? I know I'm really good at this, but I also think, one of the things we've talked about before is it's giving things a go that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. And it's okay to fail, because so many people fail to succeed. And there are so many messages in the documentary. Can I ask you, Pamela, why did you make the documentary?
Well, no, I've been thinking, because I thought you might ask that question. But for a long time, dyslexia has been in my own experience. And, just to pick up on the point, when you're navigating the school system, you can feel very alone as a parent, because, you're having these intense one-to-one conversations, and we were incredibly well supported in the national school. But you feel like you're perhaps on your own. And I remember I think one of the parents in the documentary said, we didn't know how to navigate this. And I think knowing how to navigate the system and support children, and, it's complicated because you feel you're on your own. But actually, I remember just sitting at home and listening to John Brennan on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
He was on Radio 1, I think, talking to Ryan Tubridy about his book, but about his experience of having dyslexia. And it was the response to that. He was inundated with letters, messages, voice notes. He was overwhelmed by the response to the interview. And I remember just being in the kitchen thinking, actually, there's a bigger story here. If all of these parents feel compelled to contact him directly and say, thank you for talking about this. I thought, okay. And then with my own kind of mindset, I thought, okay, I have to do this now. I have to see if this will work and, you know, give it 110% just to try and see if I can get this over the line. Because making a documentary just about dyslexia is a hard sell for, you know, a broadcaster. So we really had to, you know, I had to say, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to find a range of people, young, old, you know, from all walks of life, and look for the similarities, not the differences between everyone, but look for the similarities and let everyone tell their story and hope that the sum of all of their stories creates this huge picture that is emotional. We can connect to it, and it isn't, you know, a niche issue. You know, it's something that affects a lot of people, and
really does. Yeah.
During the course of making it, the number of people who I've talked to who've shared their experience, you know, oh, my niece is dyslexic, my mother is dyslexic, you know, my sound operator Sue is dyslexic, and fabulous at connecting with everyone and breaking down those barriers. And, you know, and I think the more real life examples of people working, talking, experiencing, sharing their stories, that the less stigma there is around it. And maybe, as you say, Timmy, people will open up more about that.
Yeah, and even if there are children watching the documentary when it comes out, when they look at the likes of John Brennan's a very successful entrepreneur. You know, he's known throughout Ireland for hotel management and having numerous hotels around the place and whatever ventures he's on. But being dyslexic doesn't set out a vision of how you're going to be for the rest of your life. It doesn't. There's no stoppages. If anything, it just kind of helps you to, when you do find your strengths when you're dyslexic and stop looking at the weak points and you're motivated, you can go on to create and do anything you want in life. Because one of the parents, or I think it was you, Georgie, said it. Dyslexic people are 4 times more driven than normal people. They have four times more drive to get things done because they have to work harder. And when a dyslexic person puts that drive into one of their strengths, it's to the moon they're going. And that's what was happened to Richard Branson, John Brennan, and numerous other people who are dyslexic who've been very successful. It's about looking at the strengths, not looking at your weaknesses and fucking giving up. It's about looking at what you can do and attaching that drive and that mentality that you have to get things done and push for things to get done into it and just drive on.
So yes, the drive that you just mentioned there, this idea that they have to work 4 times harder with that drive. And when it's successful, it is fantastic. But we also need to remember the ones that get so frustrated and so fed up that they do have to work much harder.
But I think everybody gets frustrated at the start. That's just normal because you're getting frustrated. You're sitting in a classroom. You're noticing that you're not able to do the work on the board or on the copybook like everybody else. So the frustrating that kicks in. It's about having the right people in your life that will help you, you know. And we came across a lot of parents that knew how to manage their children. You know, they knew not manage them, but how to approach it in the right way and help the child. I will be honest, very honest. Like, from some of the work that me and Georgie have done in the past, we've came across parents who aren't able to give their children because they probably had their own issues. And it's very important to have a parent and a teacher or a principal to be able to help and guide the child. Yeah. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. I would. And that, you know, that comes across very strongly that there's been a significant person who has championed, be it a teacher, a parent, you know, a friend, someone who has kept you going. Because I know that, and I know from just working on another project in the female prison, you know, a huge amount of ADHD, dyslexia, autism, undiagnosed, and people do fall through the cracks, and and I think that is sad if you've been let down by the family system, by the education system, by the care system. You can be without a significant person in your life. You can end up
totally
suffering.
Yeah, and this is the ones that we talk a lot about. I mean, I think it's so nice to see in the documentary when you've got someone, as you just said, who's championing your situation and helping and giving you opportunities and giving you chances that a lot of kids don't have. And it's those are the ones this is why we're trying to set up this charity to help focus society on those kids, because there's a huge amount of them. I mean, if we're looking at a third of the classroom, if you think about the variety of schools in the country, that's a lot of learners right now who need someone helping them, guiding them, giving them opportunities.
It's a third of the workforce 10 years' time. It's actually a third of our workforce in 10 years' time as well.
It is. Yeah.
And is it something that the government know that a lot of the people who are dyslexic and slip through the cracks, they go into construction trades? Is that something that they want? No, it might be not. Some people might think is that a bit of a conspiracy, but is it something that we want? No, listen. A lot of dyslexic people are very visual. I am. I learn from looking at something once and I have it completely. If you tried to teach me on the board, I would be lost and I'd get anxious or whatever else. But we do need dyslexics, visual people in our society as well. But what we can do there is when we find out they're dyslexic, we can teach them these strengths, the visual learning, the practical learning with their hands, and they're the gaps that we can fill in our workforce, instead of children just slipping away inside the system, being taught stuff that they're not able to learn. Teach them stuff that they can learn, and get them jobs so they enjoy going to school. They're not out the street hanging around, antisocial behaviour, God knows whatever else. This is stuff that will work, and I know it'll work because of my own experiences, but when does it start happening? When does it come into fruition?
This is the thing, because the government cannot deny the very, very high levels of prisoners who have learning differences, whether recognised or not. We have seen the research, and we know that there are, it's something like, it depending on the prison, depending on the country, but certainly in Europe, they did a research project on literacy difficulties in prisons, and it was up to 90%. What does that tell you? What does it tell you about early intervention? We could intervene earlier, give more kids more opportunities to help them strengthen their strengths, to help these kids with learning differences, to gain confidence in their abilities and their competency. I really think we would see a reduction of these high levels of prisoners with literacy needs. A huge reduction. I think, if people could look to the future and think about, maybe if we invest earlier on, we wouldn't have such a problem later down the line. I think it's so obvious. And you've done a recent documentary around prisons as well. I don't know if this came up. Did this? Yeah.
Yeah, no, very, very much so.
Yeah.
But to talk to your other point there, I think, keeping the level of confidence up, because there's a lot of people, as you say, Timmy, who are probably going to be watching this documentary and then thinking, actually, I've never been diagnosed, but I really identify, and I've had to work harder. I've had to, cope in different ways. It's been stressful, self-esteem issues. There's a lot of things if things aren't diagnosed. But I also think testing is very important. But there must be another way to support, as you say, different kinds of learning within schools, because often it is just, doing a PowerPoint instead of having to read out in the class, or there's other things, and great teachers can identify people, and but it's not something that is across the board. Our experience was we encountered some excellent teachers, and that was so important to keep confidence up and to, I guess, remove those barriers. But I know, just even from doing the documentary, the number of tests that are there available in schools is so small, and to avail of any help, you need to have the diagnosis, and it just seems to me that there must be another way of supporting kids.
But it's the system that is in place. That we need more education psychologists. We need more assessments. If you are a system that relies on having a diagnostic assessment for implementing interventions, I think that's the thing. But what can we do in the meantime? Multisensory teaching. Everyone's a different type of learner. If it's multisensory teaching, you are far more likely to reach those children who have a learning difference. And I bang on, and people would be so fed up hearing me talk about multisensory teaching, but it would reach those who need something different, who don't just want a PowerPoint or verbal information. I was just working with a couple of kids this summer who are going into their final year of school, and they have had a very negative experience because there's so much verbal information being spoken, and they can't
comprehend it. Can't
put it down in notes that work with them, that they will then find memorable. It's all too fast, too much.
And they get lost then when there's a word that they don't understand, they're stuck in that word while the teacher keeps continuing whatever his lecture is. They're still there trying to figure what that word is, and then they start getting really anxious. And the reason I'm saying this is because I'm going on my own experience.
Yeah.
I start getting really, really anxious, and then you say, what's the fucking point? What's the whole point? We need to understand how this works. And we are getting there. We are. Listen, 20 years ago, and I said, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't even know what dyslexia was. And this brings me to another point. Watching the documentary yesterday, we had 2 experts on. We had Georgie and Sasha. Both of them are English ladies. Okay. And both of them were experts in dyslexia. There was one other lady in Dublin, blonde girl, I can't think of her name. But it just shows, what that shows is there's such a lack of training for teachers or people in the area of learning differences in this country to be able to teach like Sasha and Georgie are doing here in Ireland at the moment. We need to start investing a little bit more in that as well.
I think you're talking about Hannah, who was the occupational therapist. Hannah,
yes, she was lovely.
And she was just very inspirational. But she'd gone to London, and
she went to London.
So she, I think getting to do drama, and then, but she became an occupational therapist because she saw the gap. She saw the gap. How can she, use her own experience to help others? But she's someone who has, worked tirelessly, I think, to raise awareness around.
You can tell that. You can tell she is a hard worker and really passionate about helping kids with learning differences. And it was so nice to see actually an occupational therapist on there because they play such a huge role with our, and they're great. I'm always asking occupational therapists how I can help my students who've got a diagnosis of dyslexia, not necessarily dysgraphia or dyspraxia, but because there's so many sensory needs that are involved as well. So I thought that was brilliant that she was in there as well.
I suppose you also have to know how to be able to teach a child who have ADHD and keep them entertained as well. Because I was looking at some of the stuff yesterday saying, if that was a 10-year-old Timmy, you wouldn't have been able to keep me there and entertain me enough for me to sit and work with you. Unless it was something that I had a bit of an interest in, So I thought the documentary, you got everything in that was required You got different kind of age gaps in as well. There was another guy, the PhD student. I thought he was amazing as well.
Yeah, that was Keith. That was Keith.
He's quite well known. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But that, and I think you're right. There's a lot in there, but there's a lot that we can perhaps explore and start the conversations, from that. I'm really hoping that it does inspire a lot of debate or discussion, and that all the major stakeholders and all the people affected by the issues, do actually want to talk about it. Because, Roisin, who is the teacher who, she's working with the neurodiversity group, herself dyslexic. And, we need more dyslexic teachers, people who can, understand.
She was the one who went to the dyslexia workshops.
Yes.
And then from that, she then went into teaching. And
she was inspired to teach.
Fantastic, yeah.
Well, she was
her
inspired
approach is great as well.
Yeah.
But she was inspired to teach by her national school teacher, who really believed in her as well. And she had a lot of family support. So she never felt that she was failing, but she also was quite honest that it wasn't easy. And I think that's the thing. We can see a lot of the successes, and we're often drawn to those bigger celebrities who are speaking from a point of having gotten to that point, but actually it's the real life examples that I think will capture the imagination of hopefully the audience. But we couldn't answer all of the questions, and that's the one thing about making this documentary. I thought I initially was making a film just about one thing, but it ended up being so much more complicated. And
I was going to ask you what sort of surprises were you like? What would you say that you kind of thought that you learned that you just simply weren't aware of beforehand? Or well,
I appreciated everyone was an individual, and that's very true when you look at something like this. There is no one person that's the same, and everyone's had different challenges and different experiences. A lot of the similarities or experiences from very different people from very different ages, and their concerns or their challenges, that surprised me that there was a lot of commonality about that. And you perhaps only see that when you put everyone together in a way, in a pattern, you start to see that. But no. When I first started making this, I didn't really know much about neurodiversity, for example. And that's something that really started to unravel, that there were so many other coexisting, as you say, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. I think things like that, just reflecting on my own experience at school, I was absolutely terrible at maths and, and failed everything, but it was never, none of those words were ever discussed. You were just kind of put to the bottom of the class, and then you forgot about that and just went on to do something else.
And you just thought you were a person who's rubbish at maths.
Yes, but there was never any investigation that you might actually, try and be better at maths. It wasn't, so, but I also see that, there was a lot of people are emotionally attached to their own educational experience. Going to school is something we all have to do. And when you start to tap into stories from people who perhaps, were, some kids were put at the back of the class and told they were stupid or even punished for, for not,
like
understanding. And or wanting to move around. There was a lot of things I learned just about how, as you say, all these sensory elements, and or now that we're trying to include people in school, that we have to be aware of all of those different things, and that's important too. That people aren't sort of put into separate groups, and it's just way more complicated than I ever thought it would be, but way more rewarding to, I guess, find out more about what it is to actually learn, and how we learn, and why we learn, and how we can, I guess, empower everyone to have the best experience at school, to then take that on, but also that it isn't all the be all and end all. School isn't it doesn't have to define you negatively, and if it does define you positively, there's always something else, in the future.
I think sometimes that just happens though automatically, and I think that's something that schools have to look at, particularly in secondary schools where they have classes A, B, C, D, E, F. I was a DF class, and like we knew.
What's that going to do to your confidence?
But it didn't matter at this stage. We were after going through the education of primary at this stage, and it didn't matter. We knew what we were. We weren't there to educate. We were just kept there away from everybody else who was learning. We were mad. Like, we were a classroom of wild lads. There was a lot of ADHD. There was a few autistic kids there for sure as well. I'd say every one of us had dyslexia or dyspraxia. There was a few. And our thing was just how much damage we could cause within the classroom on a daily basis.
Was it one teacher?
No, we had teachers. No, it was teachers. Like teachers just didn't even want to teach us. But
and what did that feel like to you? What can you?
For me, I had so much going on outside of school. Education wasn't really something that I really cared about. For me, what I cared about back then was how people looked at me, how people viewed me. And I suppose, like, you're at an age from 12 to 15 in your young teenage years, and you're really trying to find your peer group, you're trying to find yourself, and just trying to figure out life, your sexuality, and all these different things. This is really, really difficult time of your life. And I really didn't care about school. Education wasn't something that ever came into my mind. It was just about having to go to school on a daily basis, knowing that education was not something that I was ever going to have. It was never going to impact the job I got in life, because I know I'd probably get a trade. But if we keep you, and I don't know, are we still using class A, B, C, D, and F, or is it 1, 2, 3, 4? I don't know. Is that still happening?
I think in some schools, I think it is. Yeah.
Like if that's happening, like you're actually, it's a form of judging a child and their intellectual ability. There has to be something else that can be done to stop that, because I know schools want to keep kids that want to get an education away from kids who are being disruptive, and I understand. I do understand that, but you also have to understand the damage that's being caused to kids, and they don't even know that they're being damaged by put into a class that says F, or maybe 6 or 7. Things like that have to change. Like
it sounds wrong, and it is wrong when you look at it on a practical level. I mean, so many people I know who were just like, my husband was often put into the top room at the top of the school because he had dyslexia, that everyone just called the special class, and he remembers that really well. It's there are so many studies that prove that mixed ability is often very beneficial. So you might have someone who's naturally academic working at a table who isn't as academic or has a learning difference. And I think there are some parents who'd say, oh, well, I'm not sure I like that for my academic child. But what they're forgetting, of course, is that someone with a learning difference could be extremely influential in a very positive way, in a different light, in art, in sport, in thinking outside of the box, in problem solving, in science. And people just need to relax a little bit about letting children find their way, find their independent learning skills, work out for themselves, and not be so heavily directed. Particularly, I have to say, some of the parents who are very focused on academia and achievement, just if everyone could just relax a bit and let their children grow some resilience, grow some independence, and work it out for themselves as well, would be really beneficial, I think.
Yeah.
What do you want people to get from the documentary overall? What did you set out to aim to achieve? And from doing the documentary and from learning so much, what would you be happy with as in feedback from the documentary?
I really set out to try and show what it felt like to have dyslexia. And
Do you think you've achieved that?
It's been an extraordinary experience. It's letting people actually describe, talk about, the intimacy in terms of showing your own world, on, you know, which will be a national level. Giving voice to people is hugely important to me. I never like to use voiceover. I think it's just lovely for people to talk directly to us through the camera. I hope I've achieved that. I hope people talk about it. I hope it reaches a wider audience. I don't want it just to reach, or I wasn't trying to preach to the converted. I think it, you know, hopefully if we do have some conversation around it, it was an emotional film to make. It was a personal film to make, and I hope that level of empathy translates, and that we understand a little bit more about the fact that it's not about your intelligence, and that the more we know about it, the more we have to do about it.
Well, can I tell you that I took my mum to the screening. Timmy, you sat next to her, and when the screening finished, she turned to me and said, I don't know if you heard her say this, but she said, well, for someone who doesn't have dyslexia, it's a very good film for telling us what it's like to have dyslexia. And so, according to my mum, you've achieved that goal. And she, you know, neurodiversity is not something she really understands, and it doesn't matter how much her youngest daughter tries to explain it to her on a daily basis. So you achieve that way better than I could achieve through all the talking I do. But so well done.
I also think that, and I totally agree with George and her mother. But I also think the variety of boys and girls and men and women at different ages was very important as well.
Yeah.
There was also a traveller lady on, and she spoke about her own difficulties with education, and like I'd say her story alone around education would be amazing. Like you had a guy that was dyslexic and didn't really go to too much school, and went on to have a business, and left the business and went on to do a PhD. You know, these things are absolutely amazing, and what that does, it just inspires people. It just shows people it doesn't matter what's going on for you. You can too have this if you put in the work, you know, and get the help and have the right services in your life, you know.
Yeah, and I hope that everyone who took part is proud of the fact that they have a voice, and it's a powerful voice, and you know, I think that will connect. I hope it does connect with a wider audience.
Yeah. So it's out. It's out today. It's today. So it's at.
And today
what
is
time is it on?
September.
Pam? It's the 18th. Yeah, Wednesday the 18th, 9:30 after the news. RT1. Yeah, I hope people watch.
I'm sure people will watch it, and we'll throw it on our social medias as well, and try to push people towards RT after the news. I wouldn't be pushing them to the news because I don't watch the news myself. News in this country just seems to be one thing after another, and people will be talking to me and say, "Share about this, share about that." And it's like I'm hearing it for the first time. I said, "Fuck, when did this happen?"
It's
2
funny.
weeks ago.
I'm the absolute opposite. I'm addicted to news. Like I wake up in the morning and look at the headlines and see what's going on in the world. But I also get the fact that people don't want to know all the negative stuff. But I think it's always important to point out that it's on the news because it is usually very unique, or it's sort of, you know, rather than being something that's happening all the time. Anyway, I'm babbling on.
I think the news has always been the same since it's on television. It's just always been the same news around people being killed in different countries for no reason. This happening here, that happening, and it's just the same.
Which is why people don't want to always hear it, I think.
Or even the radio is the same. Don't even turn on the radio. Bang.
I love the radio.
Don't even watch. I don't listen to it. I have a bit of music on, and that's it. You know.
Yeah, no, music's good. I like your music or podcast, but it's a good slot. I think that's it's time when, you know, we hope to catch an audience. And can I just say thank you both for being involved, because it's just a pleasure to work with you and meet you.
And we'll definitely have you on here again when the next documentary comes out, Dorcas. Yeah, we'll definitely have you out.
I think I'll let the experts do the talking.
Yeah. So listen, Pam, thank you so much for coming here and having a chat with us today. We're very grateful. You know, and the best of luck with everything down the line as well. You know, and your crew and you were amazing to work with. You know, it was the energy and everything from each individual. And you know what, I just want to say one thing as well in relation to your crew. It was great to see a full female group of people. I thought it was amazing 100%. The way you worked together.
Great women, and also the person you didn't see who's amazing is Janice Toomey, my editor.
Yeah.
Who worked so passionately around helping me craft the stories, and was hugely important in the structuring of what was a lot of material that we shot over that time. But yes, an all-female crew.
Unbelievable. So well done.
Yeah.
And
great to see.
We'll catch up again soon. Thanks to everybody at home listening, and make sure you watch it. It's on the 18th of September at 9:30 on RT1. And what's the name?
Lost for Words.
I told you to forget. And it's called Lost for Words. God bless everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.